I thought I would start with these two quotes from Martin Luther King. I thought it was really beautiful. His whole concept of education was that we take what we know and we apply it critically, thinking about what's going on. And so many times we forget in the process of drilling memorization into the minds of children that really it's not about the information. It's about how relevant it is to us and how we apply it. That I also believe that leadership is taking the situation right where it is and moving it forward and finding people of like mind. And that's why we're here today. You know, we are a shrinking pool, are we not? How many of you are concerned about the future of Catholic schools and our Catholic parishes? Just raise your hands and look around you. I believe that as I started this work, I was very concerned about that too. I was standing in front of a group of parents about 5 years ago. I have been in this field for almost 20 by that time. And I was looking around and noticing that as I started to present or train, that what would happen is I would leave that training and I would have 2 or 3 requests to come someplace else. And my prayer time, I said, you know, God, I don't know what's going on. This work seems to take on a, wow, I wonder if that's me. I'm trying not to move. But I thought this work takes on a life of its own. And in my prayer time, God said, well, this is your call to evangelization. Everybody has a different call. This is yours. So I said, oh, okay. So I kept that to myself for a long time, and then all of a sudden I found myself standing in front of a group of parents, because when I asked parents the same question, they all raised their hands. Will there be Catholic education for our grandchildren? Will there be Catholic education by the time our children graduate from high schools? What's happening to our churches? What's happening with our priests, our religious vocations? And so I said to them, in this embarrassingly bold statement that I was just so, I couldn't believe it was coming out of my mouth. But I said to them, if this is my call to evangelization and you have the same concerns, if you're praying about those concerns, then it's your call to evangelization too. It's yours too. In whatever way God uses you today. And so I think about these words in the very bottom. This was what I would talk to kids about in bullying. I would say, when you witness bullying, don't stand silent. And when we see a place where we know there can be improvement, we can't stand silence. I believe the enemy that we have right now is the evil one, the evil work that's so insidious that attacks us and makes us believe that there's no hope. And there's nothing more powerful than the virtue of hope. It offsets despair. And so anytime you're working with kids and you're seeing a behavior that, you don't see annoying behaviors in kids, do you? No. None of those kids you think, oh my gosh, if that Kramer kid would just leave, you know? Or, oh my gosh, that one kid, if he and his family would leave our school, everything would be wonderful. Don't be fooled, cream rises to the top. Somebody else will replace that child in that family. But here's the key, that we've got to see their behaviors, what happens with them, as an opportunity to cultivate more virtue. So rather than looking at what we don't like, let's inspire them to be something we like. Let's inspire them in a habit of holiness. So in the end, it's not the words of our enemies we remember, but rather the silence of our friends. How many of you feel like this most of the time? Way too much to do and you feel like you're up in the air and you're way down. Raise your hand if you're feeling that way. You know, and I think here's the key. I love this slide because I think it really speaks to the way we feel. It's like, what? I've got to do that too? I've got to add another duty? What? Now we're shrinking. We need to do one more thing to fill in that position for that person that's not here today, or that person that won't be here next year. And many times we feel like that, but I love this scripture. And if we can just remember that burden without prayer is a burden. And God came to set us free from that overwhelming sense of feeling burdened. So you probably can't see this in the back, but I have some little arrows. And this is my picture in, I believe, let's see, this is Temple Terrace, Riverside Hills. So I was in 6th grade in Florida. Anybody else here grow up in Florida? Not many. You'd probably like to be there today, though, wouldn't you? Their winters are much milder. Anyway, I'm in the very back corner. No, I'm in the very, that's Priscilla. Priscilla's in the very back corner. She was my nemesis. How many of you had a nemesis when you were in grade school? Yes. And so there's me up there, and I was sweet and smiling, and she's got kind of a cat, you know, kind of a cagey look about her, like, I can't wait to pick on somebody when this picture's over. And then we have little Ralphie over there, and he was the other one. People would probably have identified him as a bully, but he was just very active, but he never meant harm for anybody. And how many of you have kids that just stand out and maybe they're misidentified? Have you got kids that are misidentified as bullies, and maybe their behavior is not really bullying behavior? And so when I think about that, and I think about today and the work that I do, this was a group of students, and I play a game with them, and they're all sitting in the gym, and I say, we've got to see how long it takes us to get this little Nerf ball from the first person in the front corner to the last person in the back corner. Everybody has to touch it. You can't throw it, and you can't move from your seat. And so they have to work together. It's a lesson in unity. And so when I teach virtue, I try to make it interactive so that kids get it in a way that's real and powerful. So they were working on unity. And then when I time them, they have to tell me all the ways they think they could have done it better. And then I let them collaborate, put their ideas together, and then we try different things. The only thing they cannot do is criticize somebody's idea, even if it's a silly idea. And I think that it's important to empower kids to be the think tank for creating ways of learning that's meaningful for them. So when Martin Luther King talks about critical thinking, it's that. It's taking a problem, looking and analyzing all the information that you have and know at the time, and make a decision about moving forward. And that is the leadership that we're called to in this Catholic faith. And I believe also in the scripture from Colossians, probably those of you in the back might have a hard time seeing it. We announce the message about Christ and use all of our wisdom, collectively, individually, wisdom. And wisdom doesn't just come down naturally. It is wrought, W-R-O-U-G-H-T. How many of you have had a hardship in your life and you learned a lesson and you thought, oh, that was one heck of a hard lesson I just dealt with. And when we learn something from that, God gives us something greater. There is nothing we suffer with that God doesn't give us something greater. God's goodness and God's love is greater than the worst thing we can face. And I believe we used to go camping with our kids. Anybody here go camping? And we used to go, we had 5 kids, and so it was always the cheap sites, you know, and so we didn't have all the hookups in the trailer. And we tent camped with 5 children. And at night, it'd be real dark. And we'd look way over there, and the kids would say, Mom, I have to go to the bathroom. So, of course, the restrooms were way over there, right? And all we had was a flashlight. So I'd say, okay, everybody's got to go. If one has to go, we're all going, because we're not going to do this every 10 minutes, right? And so we all go, and they're like, I can't see, Mom. Well, all I had was one of those old-fashioned flashlights. Of course, they're much more sophisticated today. Mind you, this was 30 years ago. And we'd be walking along in the dark, and all I could see was what was right in front of me. And I just wanted to make sure I didn't trip on a tree root or stumble over a rock or fall into a little pit in the gravel road. I couldn't see any further than that, but I knew where I was going. I knew the light in the restroom. And that's exactly what wisdom is. It's a flashlight in the dark. We have to keep our eyes where we're going. We're all together in unity going to heaven. Some of us will be kicking and screaming all the way because we don't like the experiences life deals us. But there will be others who are glorious in that light, waiting to lead us. And so all I could do was know the step in front of me, the step in front of me, the step in front of me. And how many of you have had that experience of not knowing? You just have the big picture. So don't worry about the journey. Keep the flashlight. Think about the outcome. And so when we look at virtue, we think about virtue as the overriding goal. So now my goal is to cultivate a holy habit. That holy habit of wisdom comes from obedience. So virtue begets virtue. So we come to this place of obeying Christ. I know you could get paid a whole lot more money doing something else. And I know that you spend lots of hours grading papers and trying to make it make sense out of your life. How many of you say, gosh, this just doesn't make sense? How many of you recognize that at the end of the month when you're paying bills? And so the thing about it is that I cannot even begin to tell you how I got 5 children through Catholic schools on one income. Don't ask me, I can't tell you. All I know is that I kept my eye on that light and I had a flashlight. That's all I can tell you. Look for the big light, carry a flashlight. And I think that made a huge difference for me. So we use that wisdom to warn and teach people so that all of Christ's followers, all of us will grow and become mature. And that's why I work so hard and use the mighty power He gives me. Each person here has mighty power by nature of your baptism. We are baptized into this holiness that just is waiting. For some of us, you're using it to its fullest extent. For others, it might be kind of lukewarm. But if we're not praying, we're not going to ever know the power that God has provided for us in those sacraments. And it's so important for us to not lose heart. So we got to run and not lose heart, because we're in tough times. We're in tough times in our church and in my community. I tell you, when I went to the Mass yesterday at our cathedral, we have a relatively, have any of you ever been to the cathedral in St. Louis? One, two, a few of you. It has got the largest collection of mosaics in the world. More mosaics there than anywhere in the world, even Rome. And it's huge. And it was about, I would say, 2/3 full from this amazing population of our black Catholics in our community of St. Louis. Lots of young people, a high school, black high school vocal group. It was just amazing. But the spirit of heaviness for what's going on in our city was tremendous. And just to raise that up and celebrate in the midst of that was just beautiful to behold. So what is school climate? And I want to talk about this a little bit because this work really founded on my work as in the world of violence prevention. How many of you are familiar with the Olveus Bullying Prevention Program? I am a certified Olveus trainer. So I have been. In fact, when I got my certification, it was provisional when I was trained. And then they said to me, you have to do work with two schools for 1 year to get fully certified. So I came back to St. Louis. At the time, I was working for a secular church or a hospital-based school outreach program, but I was constantly in Catholic schools, I would go to schools at 7 a.m. and work with a staff issue, or do a staff in service, or do a staff meeting, or work with a parent and a staff issue, or work with children on issues around discipline. And then I would go into my regular job, and then at the end of the day, I said I will do as many parent programs as my nights permit every week. And so I would do 3 and 4 parent programs anywhere I was invited to go. My first love was the church and the needs of the church. You don't have the luxury of social workers and counselors and all of the resources that are available in public schools. And our kids were leaving grade schools and going to high schools where they didn't know anybody. The families didn't know each other. Kids were getting themselves into really big jams because they didn't know the people. And so I was really committed to this work. And when I came back from the Olveas training, I said to the Archdiocese, and I said to my largest public school, which had like 12,000 kids, and I said, you two are my most frequent contacts. I need 2 schools, similar demographics. Let me know if you're interested. The words didn't even get out of my mouth when the Archdiocese said, we'll take it. And so we started with 2 schools in the Archdiocese, and at the end of the second year, we had 19 trained in the Olveas Bullying Prevention Program. And that was what I call the Cadillac of secular programs. It was comprehensive, top down, bottom up. You've got to have class meetings, you've got to have individual interventions, you have rules, you have all these things to follow. And we tried to do that, but it was awkward because it was like fitting a round peg into a square hole. I was making prayer cards for them. I was doing a lot of things, but it never came together. And when finally I realized that what we do, for the most part, is we have a disconnect between our beliefs and our faith and the way we discipline. There's a breakdown. It's like we deal with discipline and we teach kids. And school climate is so much a part of that. It's the quality of the experience that we have from day to day. And so it was this belief of recognizing from the moment I walk in the door to the moment I have my last contact in that school, that's the experience that's more important than what's happening with the kids, in my opinion. School climate is an adult issue. Bullying is an adult issue. When we learn how to be kind and loving and virtuous to one another, kids will learn from us. And right now, I would say there have been some pretty unfortunate modeling going on for kids. We have to teach them something better. And I think that's really key. And so one of the most simple ways it was said is, I just want to be able to learn without my head and my heart hurting, my body, my mind, my heart. I just want to be able to be free to learn. And so one of my directors from the Catholic Education Center started working with me about 15 years ago, and she said, Lynn, teachers are the heart of the school. So raise your hand if you're a teacher here. You are absolutely, positively the most important people. Sometimes it feels like you're the bottom of the totem pole, but you're not. You are the heart. It's what you do. It's the connection between you and that child waiting to learn. And who owns the learning? You cannot own the learning. They must own the learning. And in order to do that, we must create the most powerful connection. Relationships have to be the highest priority. So when we talk about that, it looks like this. We foster a culture of respect. We look at emphasizing. We got to give kids a way to articulate their distress. When they're experiencing problems, we need to be able to listen to them. It's really important that we need to let kids tell us their stories. Now, tattling is probably one of the biggest words I'd like to toss out of our vocabulary in schools. There's a lot of research by a gentleman named Stan Davis. He took time to talk to 13,000 students, grades 5 through 12, and they told him in their surveys that when you tell us not to tattle or snitch, that what it does is it causes us to be confused about what we can tell. And when we're in distress, we don't know what to do, so we do nothing. We suffer silently. Maybe we go home and tell. How many of you have had a call from a parent about incidents that have been going on in your school that you had no idea were going on? And the parent is like, I can't believe you're not dealing with this. And you're saying, I can't believe I have not heard. This is the first time hearing it. Raise your hands if that's happened to you. So we have to be able to give kids a way with us to articulate distress. That means we have to build relationship with them. It's important. Emphasize emotional intelligence, that quality relationships, that means quality relationships are resting on teaching kids to be emotionally literate. What does it mean to be disappointed? What does it look like to be disappointed? What does it mean to be frustrated? What does it look like? What does your frustration look like? And what does my frustration look like? And how are they different? And what do I do when I see yours is different than mine? It's a whole language and a landscape of emotion that we have to teach kids. It's okay for them to have and teach them to appropriately express it in a social setting. And how do we do that? Not by character education, because that relies on external context, but by virtue. Recognizing the holiness in each one of us and the habits that draw us to that longing for that light in the distance, that heavenly home. So creating these connections between adults and students. It was interesting, before we started today, I stood at the door and said hi to just about everybody that walked in. Some of you didn't hear, some of you said hi back, some of you smiled, some of you said hi and walked by, some of you just didn't, thought, oh, I'm going to look the other way as I walk in. It's the experience that we have in connecting, and it's not dependent on how it's received, it's dependent on us. So we can't give what we don't have. And so if we're cultivating that personal holiness, that vision for Catholic education, if we're cultivating that, it will come. Now, I told you to give kids a way to articulate distress. How many of you younger grade teachers say, I wouldn't have time to teach if I listened to every little story? Raise your hand. Yes, we have lots of little systems in place for that. I even have, it's really cute, one of our schools has a picture of Jesus in the back with a little chair. Why don't you go tell Jesus? And then you just kind of walk by and you listen. And you listen. You say, if you think it's really serious, and you and this is how you build emotional literacy. So now you say, I should talk about it. I should tell Jesus, decide. But have a situation jar. I call it a situation jar. And put in everyday, as you're observing things, put in everyday things. Somebody takes the ball from you on the recess playground. So you pull it out. 5 minutes. All it takes is 5 minutes. When kids are getting wiggly, everybody stand up. Now you decide, I want you to stay standing if you think you should come back and tell me that somebody took the ball from you at recess. And see who's standing. Why or why not? And make it okay. See, it's okay. Anything you say is okay. I don't want to frown at you when I hear something I don't want to hear. I want to have a neutral face that is open and welcoming to whatever it is you have to say. So making that connection. When we look at bullying, I think it is important. And I use the Olveus definition, and it also has become part of the Centers for Disease Control has come out with a new definition that says when we're exposed repeatedly over time to negative actions on the part of one or more, people who are not siblings or dating partners have been left out of that. So for some reason they've taken, I believe that some of those fall under other statutes like sexual harassment. And so those become legal issues. Dating violence is a legal issue. But I think that's important. And I think that there are 3 legs to this stool of peace and safety in our schools. If we're going to eliminate bullying, we can't depend on kids to figure it out. The worst thing we can tell them is you figure it out, or you play somewhere else, or I don't want to hear about it. I heard about this yesterday. So we need to, part of the problem I believe that we have as adults is that we don't know what to say, we don't know when to step in, and we don't know how to step in, and we have to empower kids to come up with a language, and that's part of the reason why I started this model of virtue-based restorative discipline, because it becomes problem solving of various situations. And so each of these comes in 3 ways. We have parents in the environment at home, the staff in the building, that's staff, everybody, not just teachers, but every single person, and then the students. And I believe kids are along for the ride. They walk into the environment that we create. And so in some of our very best schools that we work in, the teachers are there early. They're early enough to get all their stuff done, but when the doors open for the children are greeted by teachers standing at every door, greeting them, hopefully by name. If you're like me, that would be a real problem, but I can do it. But knowing that kids are coming into an environment where we're ready for them, and that's really key. I did something, there we go. I don't know if you can see these really well. I thought these were great pictures. How many of you see somebody, you don't have to raise your hand, familiar faces, maybe even your own in there. So we've got, you know, I especially like that vice principal kind of, When we talk about adult behavior in schools, it's always around sexual misconduct. That's all we ever hear in the media. We don't hear about the standard that we set for ourselves. We have discipline policies for kids, but what are we doing? How are we holding ourselves accountable? Probably one of the best things you could do is go to your school, your next faculty meeting, pull out your mission statement and break into groups. Now I tell you this because this is part of one of the very first primary things I ask schools that work with me to do. And pull that mission out and say, what are we responsible for? Ask that question. That's one group. And the next group is, how do we interact with one another? And the next one, how do we interact with parents? And the next one is, how do we interact with students? And then when you go through that, let everybody break into groups, and you are going to have an amazing description of a school that doesn't exist, because it will be this beautiful, lovely, because we don't know how to deal with conflict. And so that's the last question. When they have this beautiful image and you break, everybody reports out and you talk about that, now you get to the question of, what do we do when we fail to meet our own expectations, or we see others failing to meet the expectations we've set out in our mission? That's where everybody gets stuck. They say, well, I guess we'll go to happy hour together. We don't do anything. Or how about this? Nobody would ever write, well, we talk about them behind their back, right? We don't ever say that. And so that idea of misconduct is about how do we set up a professional code of ethics for ourselves. So now I'm challenging you to set out a professional code of ethics that's founded on the formation of holy habits, which are virtues. So students say, please don't yell at us when people are around us when we're being bad, okay? They say things like, don't hold grudges, don't label us as the bad class. I can't tell you the number of students I have worked with who've been labeled and they really struggle. I take them from where they are and say, how do you want to change that? I'm not saying they haven't owned the label. I'm saying it's not fair for us to give that label to them. Labels, like names, are sticky. They stick, and kids start to live up to those expectations. How many of you were labeled as something when you were younger, and you still own that false belief about yourself? You know, I have people that say things like, yeah, my teacher told me I wasn't college material. So I left school, I dropped out, and I didn't do anything. And then all of a sudden one day I thought, wait a minute, that's a lie. See, anything that's negative that comes against us, that takes away from the goodness of the name God gave us, is a lie. And we have to reject that. And so when we reject that and place in that place a false, that false belief becomes transformed into a truth, it's God that sets us free. Just like we heard in the readings this morning. The God sets us free. So don't call us names, don't ignore us, and don't laugh when we're wrong. And don't take time to find out, you know, please don't condemn us or punish us or discipline us before you've taken time to hear the whole story. They love this. They love it when you spend extra time with them. They love it when you encourage them. And by the way, this PowerPoint will be made available to you through internet. How many of you would like to have a copy of this? You'll have it. It's helpful when you encourage us to do the right thing. It's helpful to us when you do the right thing. As a grandmother now, I tell my children, you know, I wanted to drink, smoke, and not wear a seatbelt, but I didn't do any of those things because I knew it mattered to you. I put what I wanted aside. How many of you have a little bit of rebellion in you and you just want to do the thing you're not supposed to do? Yeah. And so sometimes we just, you know, we think about those things. Virtue is not always, it's not always a natural thing. You know, the human virtues are our challenge. In fact, Martin Luther King says, this is powerful, a lack of self-control within ourselves is like somebody coming in and rampaging in a building and tearing down all the walls. And so when we try to contain and set boundaries for ourselves, and we do that with God, they become holy habits that transform the world. They become supernatural acts. They say they don't mind if you're strict, so long as you're fair. What do you think about that? I love this. I think this is just so true. How many of you have parents and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this stuff they're posting on Facebook, right? So I think our parents, and it's really great. One of the things we've done in our, what I call our VBRD schools, we started a parent-child program. So we bring moms and daughters together and fathers and sons. We just piloted it, and it's really a great idea. The parents loved it. We had somebody come in and talk for just 5 minutes on internet to these moms and daughters, and what we did is we give them seeds of information. They communicate mother-daughter, and then they talk in the whole group. And the question was, mothers, what's the digital footprint that you have out there now that you think needs to be changed because your child is watching? Wow. It was amazing. I mean, moms, it's like, I never thought about it. I've been thinking about myself and connecting. I need to take all those pictures of me with beer and wine out, and I need to take probably some of those beach pictures out where, you know, I mean, it's like the things, and some of the things that they say about you and about your school. How many of you have had attacks on your school through Facebook? Attacks on teachers through Facebook? And, you know, those things are very real. So, you know, the funny thing is that, you know, everybody knows what's on Facebook, and it's easy to find out. Now, you can't see this purple. It says revenge, but this is the cycle of bullying. Somebody says something that hurts me, and it goes in levels. So it might be something little. One of the things that I saw was kids elbowing one another accidentally as they're getting ready, you know, like putting their book bags on and hitting somebody with their elbow. And the next thing you know, the kid doesn't say anything because he's quiet. But for about 2 weeks, he's stewing on this. And when I came into the class to work with them, I said, does anybody have an apology they feel that they owe to somebody in the class? At one point during our session, a little boy said, yeah, I do. I want to apologize to Caleb because I was putting on my book bag. I was in a hurry the other day, and I was in a bad mood. I just got a test back, and I hit him in the head with my elbow. Not real hard, but hard enough that I hit him, and I just walked away. I didn't say anything. And I said to Caleb, what do you think about what he just said? So I love that question. What do you think about what you just heard? What do you think about what just happened? And Caleb said, I've been planning to get back at him. I hadn't figured out when or where, but I was planning. And I said, well, now what do you think? He said, I've changed my mind. I'm going to forgive him. When we give kids a way to articulate that distress, you know, the nonviolent communication model says that those little things, those verbal things are violent assaults in disguise that lead to bigger things. So there's a continuum to these acts of hurt. Let me give you an example. In the adult world, you're in a hurry and you run down to the teacher's lounge to make some copies, and somebody left a jam in the copier and didn't fix it and walked away. That would be an example in your world, right? Or somebody shows up late for their duty and now you're late, okay? So the little things that we have in our heads, those little conversations, are sometimes really hard. But there's another side to this, and that's the external. The internal is depression and suicide, and as we know, that leading cause of death among young people is very troubling when we think about, you know, the silence. That's why be careful to make sure your favorite students are not just the students on either end of the spectrum. We tend to gravitate to those really good compliant students, the ones that do everything we ask them to do. We tend to gravitate to those and call them really great students. But the truth is, there might be other great students that just simply haven't been able to cultivate the voice to become the great student. And we know that. But it's hard when you're in the day trying to get through the material and you've got these 5 kids that are really with you and everything, and you've got these disturbing students that are disruptive, keeping you from getting to where you need to be. And so it's important that we recognize that those students that are disruptive are also part of our journey to heaven. We can't get to heaven without them. We can't get to heaven without the irritants in our adult world. That's part of it. God's showing us, how are you going to grow into a more virtuous person because of this person? How will this person bring out the best in you? And so that's the question that we have to ask ourselves in this work. I spend a lot of time talking about you because you're it. You are the heart of the school. You are the one that sets the tone and the temperature. You're the thermostat. You're not the thermometer when those students walk through the doors. So I do believe, I've thrown out the word bullying. We don't use it in our archdiocese anymore. We're in a very different place. It took me 3 years to convince them that we need to talk about this as a social justice issue, and we need to talk about this as harm, humiliation, and intimidation. So when parents keep calling and saying, my child's being bullied, I say, could you tell me more about that? Describe the behavior that your child is experiencing. And then when they talk about the experience, I categorize it as harmful, humiliating, meaning you're trying to detract from my good name by calling me a name. But here's the most important piece that I think we've missed, and I'm going to say this, and I want you to really think about this. We learn these false beliefs ourselves. We have to decide at some point throughout our adult lives whether we're going to own them or reject them, and allow God to bring us the truth of who we are. But the truth is that we were created with His amazing, inviolable, indestructible dignity. God's got this big wad of dignity in each of us. We are consumed with God's goodness in us. And we forget that because in the world that we're so saturated by the external, we think that people can destroy our self-esteem. And they can't. You can't destroy what God has created. You can attack it. You can attempt. But we always hold that dignity in place. And if we believe that as adults, and we teach that to kids, I've done that so many times where I've seen kids so broken down by the mean spirit. I've seen kids just completely verbally and physically attacked by their classmates, targeting one student in a class. And if I can get that student aside and say, can you tell me what you think dignity is? What does that mean to you? And they can describe it. I said, did you ever know, has anybody ever told you that you own more dignity than you can even hold in your book bag or your arms if they were stretched out? God has given you so much goodness that I can't even begin to describe it. And if I talked about it too long, I would start crying about how beautiful and good you are in God's eyes. And it's hard for us to know that in the midst of what we're dealing with in your classroom, isn't it? Yes. So now we start working on our own personal dignity, and we start to build that up. And it makes a difference for kids. Most common targets are looks, shape, and race. This is according to the students that reported, the 13,000. So when I started this work in virtue-based restorative discipline, I was doing Olveus training, and I had a school in North County, and maybe you have this experience in your diocese too, but we had a school that was in a very low-income area, lots of single parents, lots of parents, one parent doing 2 or 3 jobs, and they were really struggling. And so one of the things that they decided to do, and one of the things is, my time's up, isn't it? One of the things that they decided to do was to start this process of, the teacher said, I can't discipline these kids anymore, we have to do something different. So as they did that, as they started looking at that, she said, Lynn, will you come and work with us? And so we started to work in her school and realized that this was the beginning of virtue-based restorative discipline. So the design is to decrease antisocial behaviors and increase faith practices. We started everybody on the journey of becoming students of virtue, and we rooted it in the restorative practices. These are core virtues in the secular world that are taught as survival, necessary for survival of the species. These 6. This is secular. Virtue predates Christianity. These are 2 secular writers that have discovered this in their work. There are 7 essential, this is another secular writer, there are 7 essential virtues that we need in order to teach kids to quit killing kids. That's the biggest trauma that we face right now in our country, is children killing children. And so when we look at that, this is another secular writer, but she says these are moral virtues. Her book is Moral Intelligence, and she says we've got to teach these things for as young as we possibly can with kids. Otherwise, we're going to have failed them. So virtue inspires us with a way to return to goodness. And that base is, we call it a holy habit for human excellence that leads us to heaven. And that's the most important piece. It's built on talking circles. It's built on restorative practices. It's built on this idea of working together. And when I did my first pilot, it was with teachers. And at the end of 6 weeks, when they just had their own small talking circles, they discovered that they, number one, they had more knowledge of virtue, they practiced more, they loved the connection, they were connecting on a human level with one another, and they were also wanting to continue from 90% on up, 91% actually. And they give us a sense of belonging, and they respect our dignity because that's the way we're wired. God wired us to be in community with one another, and allowing ourselves to not only have the freedom to succeed, but the freedom to fail. And so these are the guiding principles, and we're going to talk more about those in our next session. But I want to make sure that you get your break in today. And I think we're going to have more, we'll have more conversation later on what 3 things that you can do. So I have 3 very practical strategies for you. One of them is committing to being constructive. But here's the final piece I want to share with you. When we fail to discipline kids, we're failing a nation. When we fail to address these things within the framework of our holy habits, we've failed ourselves and we've failed the future generation. So I think it's really important for us to recognize that. So thank you.